Good morning, everyone. Now, today we're talking about your heaviest internal organ. Now, your skin is technically the biggest organ that we've got, but the liver is the biggest internal organ. And it is so important to keep an eye on your liver as you get older. Now, there is a sign that your liver might actually be in trouble that you'd never in 100 years actually ever connect to your liver. It doesn't hurt, it won't turn your eyes yellow or give you a pain in your side or anything dramatic like that. Most people who have this sign put it down to being tired or stressed or getting older, and they carry on with this problem for years, sometimes a decade or more. This is what we see in practice. Whilst underneath, one of the hardest working organs in the body slowly clogs up with fat. And the reason this is so important is that fatty liver disease, what we used to call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is now the most common chronic liver disease in the world, affecting somewhere around a third of all adults. So the chances are a third of you watching this have fatty liver disease. Now, in this video, I want to talk to you about what that quiet sign actually is. I want to talk about also what's happening inside the liver to actually cause it, and exactly how to reverse it, because the liver is one of the most forgiving, regenerative organs that we have. And given half a chance, it honestly, and I mean honestly, it really does heal itself. We honestly do see this in clinical practice when we monitor people over a long time. We see liver function tests come right back down to normal with some fairly simple, lifestyle changes and a bit of behavior change. So it really is worth watching this through to the end. If you're new here, then hello, my name's Dr. Alex. I'm an NHS doctor in the UK. And the whole point of this channel is to help you prevent the diseases that I see when I'm in the emergency department, instead of waiting until they've already done their damage. Because modern life, and I've said this before, modern life is very, very good at making you ill very slowly. And modern medicine mostly waits to meet you at that point once you've already become ill, rather than acting before to try and prevent these things. Now, if this video is useful to you, then please support what I'm doing here. Please help me out by giving it a like, also giving the video a hype as well, and also subscribing to the channel. All of those things are completely free, and it really does help me to keep making these videos for you. So, what actually is this sign that you'd never link to your liver in a million years? Well, we're talking about a very flat and stubborn tiredness. Not like a sleepiness exactly, more like a heaviness and a fog, in a sense that your energy is never quite refilling, no matter how much rest or how early you go to bed or anything like that. Just something that you cannot shake. And in general practice in the UK, the sort of family medicine specialty in England, this is honestly one of the most common things that people come in with. So common that we actually have an informal name for it. We call it tired all the time, which we shorten to TAT, T-A-T-T, tired all the time. And at the practice that I worked in a few years ago, we even had a preset list of blood tests that we called TAT bloods, a routine screen that we would run for anybody coming in with vague tiredness or sort of lack of energy like this. Now, the thing is, it gets blamed on age because that is the easy, obvious explanation, and because it creeps in so gradually that it becomes your new normal and you just forget that you ever felt any difference. But it can, in some situations, probably more commonly than we'd like to admit, it can be your liver telling you that it is struggling to keep up with the work that you're giving it. And this is the bit that often gets missed, because all too often, the liver isn't even on the list of things that a doctor considers, when it absolutely could be the liver driving these symptoms. It is absolutely plausible, and it is, like I said, a lot more common than we give it credit for. There is often a second clue as well, and this is one that you can actually see with your own eyes. Now, just have a look at the skin at the back of your neck, or in your armpits, or in the creases of your body, like your thigh creases as well. And if you notice that some patches had become a bit darker and slightly thickened, almost like a bit velvety to the touch, then that is a sign that we call acanthosis nigricans. It is a clinical sign that we get trained to look for in medical school. And it happens because when your insulin levels run high for a very long time, and we're talking about years here, and this is really common in the Western world, that excess insulin acts almost like a growth signal on your skin cells, making them multiply and thicken and darken in those folds, like the creases at the back of your neck or your armpits or your groin. And as well as that, little skin tags cropping up in those same areas point to the same underlying thing. These are not skin problems to be treated with a cream. This is very much your metabolism waving a big red flag at you. And yes, just like the tiredness, there are lots and lots of other explanations for skin tags and darkened skin. The liver obviously isn't the only cause. But the point I'm making in this video is that for some people with a liver problem, these can be the only outward signs that they ever get. So we have to be thinking about your liver in cases like this, in cases where people come in with tiredness and lack of energy. Your liver, like I said, is your biggest internal organ. So it can cause a load of really vague symptoms, and we have to be thinking about your liver whenever we're a bit confused or whenever anything isn't clear-cut in medicine. Now, like I've just said, we do need to be really, really careful when we say things like this, because tiredness on its own obviously has a long list of different causes. And I never want you diagnosing yourself off a single symptom from a video like this, mine included. So please treat all of this as just one possible flag worth knowing about and worth getting checked out, not as proof of anything on its own. If you're feeling tired or lacking energy, or you've noticed a few skin tags, then please don't just assume that you've got a liver problem based on what I'm saying here. The point is that you have to get your liver checked because it could be the cause that nobody has found yet. Okay, so let's talk about what's actually happening inside the liver to turn it fatty in the first place. Well, your liver is your body's main processing plant, and one of its biggest jobs is handling the fuel from your food. Now, when you eat a lot of sugar and refined carbohydrates, which most of us do in the Western world, and especially when you drink it in liquid form where it hits really, really fast, your liver gets flooded with far more fuel than it can use right then or tuck away as its quick access store. And just think about a typical day's eating in the UK or the US. Breakfast is quite often white toast or a bowl of cereal. Both of them are refined carbohydrates. Mid-morning, it is a cereal bar or a packet of crisps or some chocolate or some sort of healthy snack, inverted commas. All of those are refined carbs. Again, lunch might be a sandwich or white pasta or pizza or a pastry. Again, refined carbs. And then dinner could be a ready meal or something low in fiber and loaded with fast carbs like chips or white rice or, again, with a sugary drink to wash all of that down. That is spike after spike after spike of glucose. And a big release of insulin occurs every time we have a spike like that. So the liver does what any sensible system does with a surplus that it can't use right now. Just try to think of this a bit like firewood. So your body burns what it needs straight away, and it keeps a small stack of ready-to-use logs in the liver and the muscles for later. But once that stack is full and there is still a pile of extra wood arriving all the time, your liver doesn't just throw it away, it packs it down into a denser form of energy, long-term storage, and that denser form is fat. Your liver stores your excess sugar as fat. That process even has a name. We call it de novo lipogenesis, which literally just means making new fat from scratch. And the liver ends up storing a lot of that fat right there inside its own cells. Now, some of you will be wondering, where does fructose come into this? Well, fructose deserves its own special mention here because it behaves, a bit differently from other sugars. So table sugar is basically half glucose and half fructose. And fructose is also the main sugar in fizzy drinks and fruit juice and honey and a lot of processed foods and sauces and sort of dressings as well. The problem, though, is that your muscles and other tissues can't really use fructose. So almost all of it goes straight to the liver to be dealt with. And the liver turns a big chunk of it into fat. So a large glass of orange juice for your breakfast, or a can of Sprite or Coke or anything like that, is essentially a very fast, concentrated delivery of fat-building fuel aimed right at your liver. Now, a little bit of fat in your liver obviously is completely normal. It can be healthy as well, but do this year after year, too much sugar and too much refined carbohydrate coming in all the time and too little movement, crucially to burn all of this off, then your liver literally becomes marbled with fat, like a well-marbled steak. Now, we used to call this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but it's recently been renamed and it is a bit of a mouthful. We call it MASLD, which stands for Metabolic Dysfunction Associated Steatoic Liver Disease. Now, as clumsy as that is to say it, the new name is technically better because it puts the word metabolic right at the front of it, which is exactly where the problem lives. And here's the part that I really, really want you guys to remember, because the modern world hits you with a double whammy. If we ate this modern diet, but we lived like our ancestors, and by that I mean rarely sitting down, we were strong and active all day long, the picture might look very different. And if we were as sedentary as we are today, but we ate the way our ancestors ate, by which I mean whole foods, nothing refined, loads of fiber, the picture may also look very different. It's the two of them together that does the damage. And that is exactly why I bang on about food and movement so often for the very same problems. This is now the most common chronic liver condition that we see, and the majority of people carrying it, and like I said at the start, a third of adults are carrying this sort of liver disease. Most people have absolutely no idea that they've got it. So if you think that this might be you, if you're feeling tired and lacking energy and your diet is a bit naff or you're not that active, then what is your actual first step? Well, the first thing to do, obviously, is to get properly checked out. Go to your GP, go to your family doctor and ask for some basic blood tests. Well, obviously get them to take a history, go with your issue, they will examine you, take a thorough history, and they should offer you some blood tests. And those should include liver function tests, LFTs. Now, those look, among other things, for two enzymes in particular called ALT and AST, which live inside your liver cells and they leak out into your blood when those cells are under stress or being damaged. So a raised level, a raised ALT or AST is, a signal that something could be wrong with your liver. One thing to know is that the exact number and the cutoff for what counts as normal depends on the units and sort of the way that your lab measures this. So that's why I often don't give figures in these videos, because they may not sort of be relevant to where you are, if that makes sense. So it's worth asking your doctor what the normal ranges are for you, but also what is optimal as well. And I've mentioned the difference there in other videos. You also want to ask for an HbA1c at the same time, which shows your average blood sugar over the previous couple of months, 3 months. And it tells you whether the metabolic picture is drifting or not. And like I said, let your doctor take a proper history and examine you, because the whole point of this first step is to exclude, to rule out the less common but more serious causes of a struggling liver before anybody assumes it's the metabolic kind, and to exclude other things that aren't to do with your liver. If a blood test does flag something, then there are quite simple next steps, including a score that your doctor can work out from a routine blood test or a special scan of your liver, other things that they can offer really to check whether there is any scarring of your liver. Now, if all of those investigations and a repeat appointment with your doctor, if all of that comes back as reassuring, then quite often what you're left with is fatty liver driven by diet and lifestyle, which is by far the most likely answer. And then you move on to the part where you actually turn all of this around, and you really can turn it around. But again, the most important thing is that your doctor examines you fully and rules out other things first. So just say that you've been diagnosed with this fatty liver condition. You've got raised liver enzymes, everything else comes back normal, and this is what your doctor has diagnosed you with. Here is exactly what I would do in order of priority. But please, again, this is just education. None of this is personal medical advice. Don't sue me. So the single most powerful thing to do is shifting a bit of the fat around your middle, because visceral fat, which I talk about quite a lot, which is that deep fat packed around your organs, that and your liver fat, they travel together as a pair. The research here is pretty encouraging because studies show that losing even 5 to 10% of your body weight can dramatically cut the fat inside your liver. And for a lot of people, it clears it pretty substantially. But please forget crash diets, forget anything that is extreme, forget doing it in a miserable sort of 4-week sprint, because this is the long game. We're on about things that you can sustain for decades. And the whole point is to be able to keep that change, keep that behavior change going. There is no point going keto for 4 weeks and dropping a bit of weight and then going straight back to eating the way that you did before, because you'll just end up, right back where you started. The aim is to change the way that you eat in a way that you can actually sustain for the next 30 years. And here is the order that I would go in. You want to cut liquid sugar first, because it is the most direct pipeline into your liver, arriving really fast and heading almost straight to being converted into fat. So that means fizzy drinks, it means fruit juices, it means the syrupy flavored coffees. And yes, unfortunately, it does mean smoothies as well, which people are always shocked to hear. And there'll be loads of you that go into the comments and say smoothies are fine. What I'm on about here really is any sort of smoothie that I would say is more than a quarter fruit, more than 25% fruit. If your smoothie is mostly spinach with some milled flax seeds, maybe a scoop of whey protein if that's what you take, and a few walnuts and some, pumpkin seeds and, some milk and just a handful of blueberries, that is obviously absolutely fine. That is not your typical super sweet smoothie, because you've got loads of fiber in there and very little sweetness, although arguably it is always better to eat whole food rather than drink it. But if your smoothie is a handful of blueberries and then a handful of mango, then a banana, then a splash of orange juice and just a bit of spinach thrown in for good measure, that is a very sweet drink. And that's the kind that causes the problem. The next thing to do is to take out the refined carbohydrates like the white bread, the pastries, the sugary cereals, the, Cookie Crisp, the Cocoa Pops, the Frosties, even some granolas. Basically anything beige or really pale or really sweet like the cereals. And you want to rebuild your meals around protein and veg and beans and healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, which barely trouble your liver. And for those of you that ask, I always get mine from Citizens of Soil, the olive oil, that's what I'm talking about there. The next thing you want to do is walk after your meal. So 10 to 15 minutes is great. And the reason this is so important is that your leg muscles pull the sugar out of your blood before your liver ever has to deal with it. Remember, a working muscle, so legs that are moving, those muscles need fuel, so they will take the glucose straight out of your blood and use that to burn for energy before it gets to the liver. The other thing that you want to do is lift something heavy a couple of times a week, because the muscle that you build becomes a bigger storage tank for your sugar, and that takes the pressure off the entire system for the rest of your life if you sustain that muscle and you keep building it. There is also decent evidence that a couple of cups of coffee a day could be protective for your liver, which is a rare bit of good news for all you coffee drinkers out there. And for what it's worth, I often have mine black in the morning and I use my Nespresso machine. I'm not saying that this is absolutely factual, but this is just something I read recently. Black coffee could be really good for your liver. The other thing to mention is oily fish a few times a week really does help as well, which is part of why I have sardines or mackerel every single week. We have it at least twice a week. Now, there is another practical thing to mention here. Once you've made all of these changes, you want to get your liver function tests rechecked, ideally every 3 months or so. And if there is a long wait to have that done, if your doctor refuses or it's just not practical through the NHS or whatever healthcare provider you've got, it really is worth going private just for the blood tests. And then once the new habits have become routine and your numbers are settling back down towards normal, you can probably drop back to checking them maybe once a year or so. Now, a private blood test might be, I don't know, £50, £100, maybe £200, but just think about the information that it gives you. We're talking about information that could potentially prevent a disease or help you to live longer. I think that's a pretty good